Well, everyone, let me introduce myself once again. I'm Gaurav Ketkar, and I'm a computer science graduate at UTD. And currently I'm conducting research under the guidance of Dr. McMahan. So one day in his class, probably after talking with Dr. Hoffman, McMahan was like, guys, here's a bright idea. Wouldn't it be awesome if UTD had the world's biggest cave? And we were like, yeah. I mean, that would be awesome. But then, what is the point of that? I mean, he quickly assured us that that is not the kind of the cave that he had in mind.
Make a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Films.
So a cave is a cave automatic virtual environment. And the name cave comes from Plato's allegory of the cave, in which he states that the prisoners who are bound to the walls of a cave have their shadows on the wall as their only perception of reality. So a cave is a room-sized environment in which projectors display computer graphics on multiple walls. So this could be a cave with each of the walls being this projector screen. A cave typically looks something like this. In this slide, you can see that the users are surrounded on 4 sides by computer screens. So the walls make up the 3 sides and the floor is the 4th side. A cave is typically constructed something like this. So it has projectors on all sides of it from the outside. This kind of projection is called rear projection. Now this is frontal projection, and because when I get in the middle of the screen, occlusion. Rear projection is when the projection is behind the screen, so that no matter where I stand, my shadow doesn't show up. A 6-sided cave is a 3-storied structure. So this is the kind of the cave that we want, and it typically involves at least 12 projectors. So the mirrors are used to reduce the distance between the projector and the screen. So in absence of the mirrors, this projector would be somewhere here. So that would increase the height and the dimensions of your cave. Okay, so now what are the 3 key visual components for immersing the user inside the virtual space? Dr. Kochun has talked a lot about the advantages of having an immersive screen. So stereoscopy. Stereoscopy is the principle or the technique of showing a different image to the left and the right eye. So the same laptop's image is shown from a slightly different perspective to each of the eye. And the brain does all the work of making that image look 3D to you. So that is your brain doing your work for you. So the next point is field of regard. We all know what field of view is. Field of view is a common term, but what is field of regard? For example, let us look at this slide, which shows that a typical widescreen computer monitor will give you a field of regard of 90 degrees. Take that up to a 2-sided cave, and you have a 180-degree field of regard. For a 4-sided cave, it becomes 270, and finally, for a 6-sided cave, you have 360 degrees in both the horizontal and the vertical axes, because everything is a screen, right? Now let us look at this short video, which shows what it feels like to be inside a 360-degree cave.
Wow.
So everywhere you look is a screen. Finally, the most important part of being in a cave is head tracking. So in the real world, when you move around, the perspective that you see obviously changes. But how is the computer going to know that you're moving around in a cave? So your head needs to be tracked. Basically, you need to be tracked, but you are where your head is, right? So the computer just tracks your head. In this video, you can see that this person is sitting inside a cave on a chair, and as he moves his head, which is being tracked, the perspective or the visuals that are being displayed on the screen change. So this is the kind of head tracking that we are talking about. Now
I'm going to show you what it looks like without head tracking, which is what displays normally look like. You can see that although it's a picture of a 3D room, the image looks very 2-dimensional and bound to the surface of the TV. Now with head tracking turned on, the TV actually looks like the entrance to a real room. Just like in real life, by moving our head around, we can look behind objects. And if you look really closely, some targets actually appear to be floating out in front of the screen, reaching into the real world. If we get closer to the screen, we get closer to the objects, and we can even get behind the ones floating in front of the screen.
That's awesome.
Now this is actually the research of a guy
As I
called
pull the
William
camera
Lee,
back,
who has a very interesting TED talk on this. So it is called the Nintendo Wii hack or something. Now let us look at the three key interactive components for engaging the user in the virtual environment. First one is 3D selection, then we have 3D manipulation, and then finally 3D travel. So 3D selection is, so this is the part where we have the audio-visual lock. Stop music. Let's mute that. And now you can see that the person which he just went ahead and grabbed the handle like he would in real life. So there was no clicking of buttons, no selecting things with your mouse. You just reach out and grab the handle.
Wow.
So that is 3D selection for you. 3D manipulation is when you can actually reach out and change things inside the virtual environment. So this is an extremely complex machinery of God knows what, and these two people are, changing cylinders and taking out stuff and probably breaking the machine in the process. But anyway,
It looks like the heating unit in the building.
it does. Maybe they're annoyed with the heating people and they just take it out.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And finally, there is 3D travel. So this is a technique developed called the human joystick technique, in which you're standing inside the cave, and there is a central black square. So when you move away from the square, the room will try to position itself you back in the square. So now you'll see what I'm talking about. As soon as the user moves out of the square, the screen starts moving in that direction. So this is just one of the many techniques which could be developed,
Wow.
Can I ask a technical question?
Sure.
What difference in producing the software that is or the visualizations that's going on here is required as opposed to CGI animation or anything like that? What additional training, what additional stuff is required to produce that?
So if I understand your question, okay. So if I understand your question correctly, what you mean to ask is, if somebody is developing something for the flat screen, the computer, using some set of tools, what will he or she have to learn differently to develop tools for the cave?
Exactly.
Okay. So what we are currently using is, we are using a game engine called Unity 3D.
What's it? I'm sorry?
Unity.
Unity. Okay.
Yes. And that is a game engine which is used by many game developers. Maybe Stephanie knows something about it. And so not a lot needs to be done. We have a 5UD, that is a 5 immersive development environment setup, in which there is a framework set up for you, and the gamer has to just develop the games and just put them in the framework. So it'll just work.
Got it. So
Does that
a lot
answer?
of that is done. A lot of that is pre-programmed
Yes.
in order to do that.
Yes.
They don't have to okay, good, perfect.
How, in terms of trying to marry this with business and things like that, again, geo nerds, I think in oil, how much of this can you take imagery or CGI or anything like that is already meant for a 2D environment, and because you're asking what would somebody have to learn differently to be able to do that, but if you already have a product, can you then, convert it to where it can be applicable to a cave environment, if it's not originally generated for that?
Well, it would be a little bit difficult to, because our traditional products are meant for, a flat screen.
Right.
So they don't render. The field of regard in that cases is just 90 degrees. So they're just rendering this much of data at a time. A cave is rendering all that data at the same time.
Right.
So some changes are definitely needed to, create content for the
And
cave.
part of what we're going to do is we're going to have a lab, and we're going to have the experts there. We're going to have students, and we're going to have people in there who can take the 2D as best they can. I mean, there are going to be some things that can't get converted to help convert into 3D. So we've talked a lot about that as to how to do that, because in the beginning especially, you're going to have a lot of 2D needing to go over to the 3D. And so we've talked about that. But it's interesting in the oil and gas. I didn't know it. Caves were started because of oil and gas.
Well, yeah, Arco, 2 minutes down the road,
Has
had
it.
one,
Pioneer has one.
Yeah, and so
And nobody uses it because they don't know how to use it.
Yeah, no.
And I mean, part of what we can offer is now we're going to be teaching our students, but we can also go to companies and teach them the benefits of it. But they're going to want to hire our students because they're already going to know how to do it. So when they go in, they can then teach everybody else the benefits of it. So you kind of have to start somewhere. But the oil and gas companies are way ahead on this than a lot of other companies, especially.
If I could just interject, a big part of it is the data itself. And we can talk about geoscience, we can talk about astronomy, but maybe the best analogy is the MRI. So an MRI is a two-dimensional image. It is not a three-dimensional image of your bones or your tissues or anything else. But if you now construct a three-dimensional model of the data, so now you have subsurface conditions, or you have astronomical positions, or you have the tissues in the body or DNA, or if you now have that data constructed three-dimensionally, you can you can do many different things and you can fly through it. But also that then requires massive computing power. But there's this chicken and egg, because now we're actually collecting the data. That's what big data is all about. We now have the data. So how do we visualize it? How do we manipulate it? So it's a very interesting set of issues that we're challenging.
And it's kind of
that's my
changing.
point too. I mean, I'm on the fundraising committee, so I presume you're going to ask me to go talk to companies. And I need to be able to tell a company that if they've got big data that needs to be visualized in some way, or maybe they haven't even imagined it could ever be visualized, is there a resource already on the ground at UT Dallas? Not the fact that we have the cave and the dome, but can someone take that big data and make it possible to visualize?
Well, that's what
Roger.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, that's what Roger Molina's working on.
Okay, all right.
If there are the general entertainment, the big general entertainment, gaming, and entertainment companies, okay, who have a lot of terrific graphic designers and incredible ways of doing detailed kinds of situations, your Pixars of the world, could they, with a nominal amount of additional training, be able to take what they are doing, even if and take entertainment out of your mind for a minute. If we gave them and say, this is what we need to get built on something like this, but because they're such incredible graphic artists and things like that, would they be able to, with a modicum of training, be able to kind of produce stuff for this?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Okay, so let me just give you a quick example of what possibly you could do. I'm just thinking on my feet right now. So we have this motion capture space in the ADEC building, okay? And it has a truss set all around it, so you can have projectors hanging all over it, for example, I'm just saying. So what if you wanted to make a cave out of it? So what would you need to do in the software side? So all that you would need to do is, the Unity game engine has cameras. So where the player is going to be, you have a camera, okay? So why not just have cameras on all the sides around the player? So each of the cameras sees a different perspective. So maybe this camera sees this perspective, and so on. And the projectors in the mocap space display the image of a single camera. So this projector will show the display, or show the images that this camera in the virtual world is seeing. There's your thing.
Got it. Excellent.
Okay.
Just lots of conversations going.
Yeah. So now we have talked about the benefits of immersive virtual environment a lot, and this kind of, focuses more on that. First one is visualizing data. So what do you think this is? What does it look like? A bundle of dots? What this is the data from a large hadron collider. That is, you make the photons go around at the speed of light, and you collide them, and then you see the results. Now, this kind of data to be, analyzed in 2 dimensions is extremely difficult for, spatially challenged people, or people who cannot visualize data properly. So, what does this circle mean? What is this rectangle? When you look at this data in the cave, this becomes extremely easy to interpret. So, this circle is your base. This circle is your ceiling, and this rectangle becomes a cylinder. So you immediately see the data that you want to see without any additional, cognitive load on you. So that is the, advantage of a cave. And then there is collaborative work. So you could be inside an environment where, multiple people are working on the same project Each of them is wearing a stereoscopic goggle, so they all get a 3D image of what is being shown. And then finally, 3D travel. So we'll see a short video where she's traveling around, she's changing the color of things interactively. See, that is cool. This is a travel technique. This is the medical application. You're inside the brain or something.
Yeah, there's fantastic words, like
Yeah.
to 6.8.
It is pretty neat. Wow.
Okay, this concludes my presentation.
That
Now I'll
was
take your
fabulous.
questions.
That was fabulous. I think we've asked a lot of questions. As we've gone. Does anybody have any more questions about the cave? That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you put
I
that
do have
on
one
my-
quick
on my-
question. One of the things we want to do between the cave and the planetarium with the dome is to have cameras viewing things going on in the cave. How will that affect the operation of the people in the cave? Would they be aware of these cameras and would it change their behavior in any way, or can it be done while they ignore the fact that they're being observed by somebody else? Is that an issue that would...
Well, currently in the mocap space, what we have are 16 Vicon cameras, which are not noticeable because the user is wearing a heads-up display.
Okay.
But we can say that the virtual environment would be so immersive that the user may not even notice, we don't usually notice CCTV cameras, do we?
Yeah.
So
Those are
maybe
so
something
small.
like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not really
They're
sure.
engrossed in the images that are being presented on the screen, on the wall, the 6 walls or whatever. So not aware of somebody else observing them when they're immersed in that. That's what I'm asking, whether or not that would affect their behavior.
Well, I'm not really sure about that.
It's probably some
You
test
just
we'd
did.
have to do.
Yeah, we may have to test that.
Yeah. But that was absolutely fabulous. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate your. Got brain. So thank you. Kate, can you just put the lights on for us again? All right, now we know what a cave is, and we've actually seen what it can do, and it's stimulating a lot of conversations, obviously. So I think this thing does keep getting bigger. Bob kind of talked about that before, and we're living it because it has grown from just a planetarium into what it is now. And every time we talk to somebody, it grows even bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so now we know what the dome does.